Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We're going to read Bhakti-Yoga from Swami Abhedananda's Complete Works.
Is that the same volume that we?
It's same volume. Yeah, we're just jumping around in the same old volume. Yeah.
And would you say that we concluded the grand crescendo, the study of Om last
Yes.
night?
So this is a short little chapter, so we may finish it in one night. It's what volume are we in? 3. We're in volume 3, and it's chapter 6 in volume.
Of what, may I ask?
Vedananda's Complete Works, and this is chapter 6. And he does love his thes, doesn't he? The Bhakti-Yoga. Bhakti-Yoga teaches that the final end of all religions can be reached through love and worship of the personal God, who is the creator and governor of the phenomenal universe. It leads to the same destination as all the other branches of yoga, but is especially suited for such as are emotional in their nature and have the feeling of love and devotion highly developed. It is for these devotees who, conscious of their own weakness arising from the lack of self-control and the knowledge, seek help from outside, and who, taking refuge in the Supreme, pray to him for forgiveness and pardon of sins committed through ignorance of the moral and spiritual laws that govern our lives. All dualistic systems of religion, like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which advocate the worship of a personal God, knowingly or unknowingly preach Bhakti Yoga and direct their adherents along the path.
Well, I always find this is full of honey.
Yeah.
It's like we're coming to the honeycomb. Coming to the honeycomb tonight, and a lot of bees are there already. This was given when, do you think, Swami, approximately? In the 1920 era, more or less, probably, from one of the 16 disciples whom we have come, just as it happens on the pilgrimage path of life, to read and to study. If study means to try to assimilate within, internalize, his works rather late in the 16. We started with Swami Vivekananda at Swami Swahananda's suggestion, request, and it's been a wonderful journey. Precisely because, as I like to think of it, we see these 16 disciples standing around in a circle, facing Sri Ramakrishna in the middle, and they're seeing him, each one of them, let's say, from their own angle of perception. And it really does fill in the circle. Now, this particular Swami spent a lot of time in the United States, 20 years. Vivekananda asked him to come over. Isn't that right, Swami? He asked him to come over. And he spoke to large audiences, I think at least 1,000 people in one, maybe more, in Brooklyn, probably. And he resonated with the times. It was as if you're bringing an Irish harp, we'll say, a beautiful Irish harp from Ireland, or an instrument from India, but you're sitting it there. And then in America, you start strumming the strings, don't you see? And the vibration carries the meaning of the day, the attitude, the perception, the level of development. And frankly, I submit for your reference, your evaluation, that all of the direct disciples did that vis-a-vis the extension from India of Vedanta the ancient tradition of India, most identity and identification, if you make it rather expanded view of it, of what Indian spirituality is all about. Indian spirituality is based on the Vedas. That's the one thing that holds the country together, and all the different perceptions. The reason I say that is that 5 disciples came to this country, starting with Swami Vivekananda in 1893. But even some that didn't come. Preeminently, we might think Swami Brahmananda, our grandfather Swami here, he said, I know what you're doing in America. And he meant that in detail. I know what you're up to, what you're doing. And this wonderful grandfather Swami, the first president of the order, Vivekananda made him such. Ramakrishna said, asking mother for a person like himself, a son, in attitude, and that's what Ramananda was. But I know what's going on in America. And even down the generations to a wonderful Swami named, oh my goodness, his name starts with G, the simple one that lived in Vrindavan. Anyway, he would be like a 3rd generation Swami, disciple of a direct disciple. And he kept up with America and American people. He loved us, just loved us. And another Swami who left here after many years was back in India, in Lucknow. And I said, Swami, would you like to give any greetings to the American disciples? Because they loved him so much before he went back. He said, yes. He said, to all of the ones I know and those who I don't know. Isn't that lovely? I said, my greetings and blessings, whatever. So now we've got another whale of an opening paragraph in which he expands the sociology, really, of this being a national religion like Judaism was. A genie in a bottle that now's out of the bottle and you'll never get him back in again. It's an international religion. But then all mystics come from the same country. I love that phrase. Speak the same language. So Bhakti-Yoga, let's go on a pilgrimage. Let's enjoy this today and go up the mountain. The word bhakti in italics means devotion, while yoga, capital Y, in this case signifies union of the individual soul with God. And most of us, many of us, some of us maybe a little more than others, but oh boy, we get a tingle every time we find out a word that is resonant in English because we once spoke a common tongue. And the grandmother tongue was spoken by a people, now called the Indo-European people. That's their language family. That, I like to say, some went east and some went west and some flew over the cuckoo's nest. So yoga is our word yoke. And yoga doesn't mean athleticism. It means basically union with God. Hence, Bhakti Yoga is the method of devotion by which true communion of the soul with the Supreme Deity, capital D, is accomplished. It shows what kind of devotion and love for God will bring the soul into the most intimate relation with the divine being, capital B, and how even the ordinary feelings of a human heart, when directed Godward, I love these capitals, capital G, can become the means of attaining spiritual oneness with the soul. You guessed it, capital S, of the universe. Raja Yoga, and that's the path of meditation, the kingly yoga, because, and of course Raja and royal and regal, same word, kingly, because it's common to all the other 3 paths, the path of work, the path of knowledge, the path of love. It's like a handle for all 3. And yes, it's a bit of a discussion, but colloquially I think we would say that in the Vedanta Society of Southern California, we sort of take it for granted that the royal path of meditation is essential. For any of the other paths, one or more of Abhedananda says blended. And if we're working on the other three, one or the other or all, the essential one, the foundation, if you will, where it happens, the temple of one's own heart, is the royal path of meditation. And I might just add that everyone who comes here has a choice. Isn't it true, Swami? I don't know, intentional or non-intentional, willy-nilly, to spend time during her lifetime and his lifetime in the silent recesses of one's heart, thinking and pondering and yearning in receptivity and wanting to love God, for God, wanting to love God. So Raja Yoga tells us that desire, passion, love, hatred, pride, and anger must be completely conquered before perfection can be reached. Well, it is perfection. And yes, one isn't perfect until one reaches it. But it's kind of like a dog's curly tail, don't you see? Striving for perfection is the means to perfection, and the arrival of these things is perfection. A student of Raja Yoga, remember the one that's essential for all three, a student of Raja Yoga must not only keep constant watch over his mind, but he must also faithfully practice the 8 steps already described. It's called Ashta Vakya, right? Something like that.
And this is part
Yeah.
of his book called How to Be a Yogi. So that's
Oh, How to Be a Yogi. Well, finally we find out what the name of the book is. Now we know what we're doing here. Okay, so these 8 steps, which are well worth reading, we might just bring it in next time and read it. I myself am reviewing them now in my heart, each day a certain section of them. The 8 steps of meditation of Raja Yoga already described, if he would achieve his highest ideal. He must faithfully practice the 8 steps. While in Bhakti-Yoga, we learn that all desires and passions, whether good or bad, can be directed toward God. You can even get angry with God. Who are you going to get angry with? Everything else leads to dissolution, destruction. Probably more of the person who gets angry than the person that person thinks caused the anger. But to say, oh, Lord, some of the boys go to the elder Swamis after a while. Oh, I've meditated, I've worked so hard, I've done all this. I don't feel anything. Oh, Lord, why am I not making any progress? And people like Brahmananda, who were the grandfather, all of them had nirvikalpa samadhi, complete unity. He'd say, well, on the one hand, you are making progress. You just don't see it, don't know it. And sometimes you get a little hint, yeah, if I hadn't been here, if I hadn't done this. And the other point is that, like our founding Swami, a disciple of Brahmananda, said, we say we want it. We want God. We want to be in his neighborhood. But putting an American language, how bad do you want it? It's a question of intensity. It's a question of degree. That's what they say. They won't let us off the hook. So then he says, instead of binding the soul to worldliness and earthly attachment, all of which is a mirage, as sure as the will-o'-the-wisp, which is swamp gas in the woods. It just disappears and shows its nothingness. It's all, as the Jnana Yogis tell us first day in school, about discerning between the apparent and the real, and the apparent, the progeny of the firstborn of ignorance, which is the ego, give us nothing but pain. That is to say, ultimately, just by their very immateriality, it's gone. They become a means of attaining God consciousness and absolute freedom from selfishness and wickedness. Wow.
The follower of the Bhakti-Yoga should feel God as closely related to his soul as possibly can, and regard him not only as the Lord of the universe, but also as father, mother, brother, sister, friend, or child. Even the relation existing between husband and wife may be cultivated and developed in the heart of a lover of God, intoxicated by the soul-striving wine of divine, soul-stirring wine of divine love.
You can really sling the lingo.
When the whole heart and soul of a bhakta, or lover of God, flow like the unbroken current of a mighty river, surmounting all barriers and dashing headlong toward the ocean of divinity, he finds no other attraction in the world, holds no other thought, cherishes no other desire, speaks no other word, and sees no other thing than that his most beloved, the omnipresent deity. He resigns himself entirely to him. Resigns, sorry. Well, I was thinking of reins like tying. Anyway, he resigns himself entirely to him. And I mean, that's what yoke is all about, yoking, right? Yeah. He resigns himself entirely to him and surrenders his will to the will of the Almighty One. He works, but without thinking of results. Every action of his body and mind is performed simply to please his beloved one. His motive power is love alone, and by this he breaks asunder the chain of selfishness, transcends the law of karma, and becomes free. Thus, a true bhakti yogi, being constantly in tune with the infinite, loses the sense of I, me, and mine, and makes room for thou, thee, and thine.
I feel the same way. It's breathtaking. It's like walking into a grand cathedral and hearing the organist at an off moment. You and he are there alone, playing on this magnificent organ with all of the banks and all of the notes almost simultaneously, and filling the temple with thought. We have a church not far from here, an Occidental Congregationalist church, and it's one of these grand, I don't know what word to use, but inspired by the Gothic cathedrals of Europe. And whether they're built out of concrete or stone, I'm not altogether certain. And they were quite the vogue. As a matter of fact, I went to one in New York, and the recent pastor there that I met while he was pastor there at some kind of convention, Congregationalists were getting together. He had been a minister at Riverside Church in New York as well. Anyway, that organist was playing on the consolidation of three organs. An English organ, it's just like the Gothic cathedrals in England, kind of, up and a little more intellectualistic and vertical lines and all that. And a German organ with the bass notes, the booming, what a wonderful foundation, God, as Paul Tillich used to say, being with the capital B, the Raum, he used to speak as the Raum, the being. And they had a few pipes from, I believe, a Presbyterian organ somewhere in Pasadena or something like that. And they had thousands and thousands of pipes in this thing. And the organist gave us a wonderful tour one day. We all had lunch afterwards. He was able, through computer, digital, to play like all the notes at once. So I don't know about y'all, but giving honor to each other's path, to each person's path or combination of paths, one's own temperament and personality, we can certainly love the path of the other person if it's not quite the same. Each person has their own relation with God. They said, and it has so many gods and so many names for mother. How come? And 108 names for mother, 108. And the Western asked him, I said, oh, no. Maybe even Abhedananda said this, I don't know. Said, no. Not just whatever number was given, hundreds. We have at the moment about 7.3.4 billion gods.
7.3?
Billion.
Oh, I see.
Each person has their own relationship. So I just think this is a huge thing. A banner, a light at night, marquee. His motive power is love alone, and by this he breaks asunder the chain of, this is the thing I think is on a banner, of selfishness, transcends the law of karma, and becomes free. There's your organ. Thus a true bhakti, being constantly in tune, the Swami's just read, with the infinite capital I, loses the sense, in italics, of I, me, and mine, and makes room for thou, thee, and thine. Now, to me, we is good enough. I think you know what I mean. We's a pretty rare word anymore around here if you're living in the United States. And one of our Swamis, I believe it was the Swami from Boston, Abhedananda, disciple of a disciple of Ramakrishna, gave a whole lecture about it, we. It requires, don't you see, to see the subjectivity in everyone and everything else, even a chair. That's what we's all about. You can't do it. You can't do it unless you give sovereignty to the spirit in the other person. And then it becomes kind of like easy, at least easier. And that's how Jesus added that extra commandment, you know. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy strength, thy mind, heart and soul. 4 yogas. And thy neighbor as thyself. So once you begin to get the idea that even the tree has a subjective experience going on, and the birds and the squirrels, my gosh, you have to fend them off. You go in the garden and often the rose plants try to grab a hold of you, your sleeve, your shirt, won't let you leave. The desert. You got to be careful when you go to the desert. No, you do, because I've heard it said, and I believe it's true. The desert claims its own, wants to claim its own. The love is real. A bhakta never forgets his relation to his beloved. His mind is concentrated and one-pointed. And boy, did we see a concentrated mind around here in Ernesto, right? Up from the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. Most one-pointed man. If you were an artist or a scientist or a person in the spiritual path or a salesman, you couldn't do better than to have that one-pointedness to bring peace to the kingdom and bring energy and resources to the Amazon so that 365,000 indigenous people can replant their homeland. That's we. And once you feel that solidarity, that's what religion's all about. Like a mighty army moves the Church of God. Brothers, we are treading where the saints have trod. Boom, 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 boom. We are not divided. All one body we. One in hope and one in love. One in hope and one in faith. And one in charity. So obviously I love what he's saying, and I think it's a broadcast. True devotion, true devotion or continuous remembrance of the divine ideal leads to unceasing meditation and ultimately lifts the soul into samadhi, in italics, union with God, that experience, where it realizes God and communes with him, undisturbed by any other thought, feeling, idea, or sensation, becoming dead to sense phenomena it lives on the spiritual plane of God consciousness, and he's like a good German. God consciousness is all one word, like computer language. That's what happens to the soul. It gets lifted into the experience of oneness with God. Wherever such a yogi casts his eyes, he sees the presence of the all-pervading divinity, capital D, and enjoys unbounded peace and happiness at every moment of his life. It is for this reason that Bhakti-Yoga is considered to be the easiest of all methods. What a Raja Yogi attains only after years of practice. You know, Gerald Hurd, who sat in this very room, one of the three great Englishmen that came to Swami Abhedananda, he used to practice hours a day, at least 6, a certain time in his life. So what a Raja Yogi may attain only after years of practice of bhakta accomplishes that in a short time through extreme devotion and love. And incidentally, if you're forced by circumstances, as the country is forced by circumstances today in the midst of a grand pandemic, the intensity can come. It's easier. Swami used to say incredible things. So from India, it's the big sphere of unity, synthesis. He said, happiness is a great teacher, but misery is a greater teacher. So he says, right, char. He says, the Raja Yogi attains only after years of practice, may attain. A bhakta accomplishes that in a short time through extreme devotion and love. So if that can be cultivated, you're on the way. That which a karma yogi, the man of action or woman of action, finds so difficult to achieve, a bhakti yogi attains easily by offering the fruits of all his works to the almighty source of all activity and the ultimate end of all motives. So Swami, quoting his teacher Brahmananda, used to talk about the Sahaja Yoga, easy yoga. Now, I think a person might want to consider this when you go into the car salesman of life. Most of these cars are pre-owned. They've been driven before by saints who've reached their union with God. So you're kicking the tires, you're checking them all out. I think one would do well to give more than a casual glance. Very well. To include at least as part of the regimen, and maybe the foundation, for many, of Bhakti Yoga. So what is the Sahaja Yoga? Swami Brahmananda said, just thinking of God, say once a day. How about twice a day? 3 times. 10 times. 1,000 times. Man in the back, 10,000, 10,000. 10,000, 10,000, who'll give me 100,000, who'll give me a million?
2,000.
How about infinite? To never let it break is the goal of the aspirant. Like oil poured from one vessel to another. Just to think of God as many times you can in a day. Hey, they kind of make it easy for us, and they kind of make it very difficult for us to come up with objections. Excuse me.
The Bhakti Yoga has 2 grades. The first is Gauni, or preparatory, and includes all the preliminary practices. The second is Para, or the state of supreme love and devotion to God. A beginner in Bhakti Yoga should first of all prepare the ground of his heart by freeing it from attachment to earthly objects and sense pleasures. Then, by rousing in it extreme longing to see God, to realize divinity, to go to the source of all knowledge, and to reach perfection and God consciousness in this life. He must be absolutely earnest and sincere. He should seek the company of a true lover of God, whose life is pure and spotless, who has renounced all worldly connections, and who has realized the true relation which the individual soul bears to the universal spirit. If by good fortune he meets such a real bhakta, he should receive from him the seed of bhakti planted in the ground of his heart, and by faithfully following the instructions of the master, take special care to keep it alive and make it grow till it becomes a large tree bearing the fruit of divine love. He should have respect, reverence, and love for his master, who will open his spiritual eye and transmit his own spiritual power to his soul. When these powers begin to work, the soul will be awakened from the deep sleep of ignorance and self-delusion.
Swami, I don't know if it's because it's evening now, the evening raga, evening song, that Episcopalians have a wonderful phrase, even song, services. And you've had a busy day and all of that. I'm having a little trouble breathing. I feel that we're swimming. We're swimming over our depths, like in the ocean here near the shore, maybe. I'm having a little trouble breathing. It's so wonderful. And of course, that's what this place is dedicated to. This place is a place of pilgrimage. We've been walking around the perimeter lately and thinking about this place as it may be hundreds of years from now. There will be a cathedral here someday. Big church. We already had the plans offered to us at a putative price of $2 million of the build of the church. And it was just sketchy, by a great architect. And he did that, just to see what it might look like and put it in the big garden. But this place is now a place of pilgrimage and has been for over 100 years. Not quite. 1929. But Vedanta has been around for at least that long. Swami Abhedananda came to South Pasadena in the year 1900. So people will beat a path to this place just for the atmosphere, just for the Swamis, just for what they're offering, from a simplicity of heart. And oh yes, I forgot to mention, there's already a cathedral here. And we're told by the Swamis in our own heart. And there you is. Well, now I'll just see if I can maybe find this thing, because it's just so wonderful. I'm so sorry, Swami. You got... Yeah, the guru or spiritual eye-opener. That's the teacher. Knowing that, and it said that when the soul is ripe, the teacher will appear. Knowing the natural tendency of the disciple will advise him to look upon God as his master or his father or mother, and will thus establish a definite relation between his soul and God. Henceforth, the disciple should learn to worship or pray to the Supreme through this particular line of relation. At this stage, symbols, rituals, ceremonies may appeal to his mind, or he may repeat some name of the Lord that signifies the special aspects of the divinity corresponding to the relation which he bears to him. Constant repetition of such a name will help the mind of the neophyte to become concentrated upon the divine being. During this period, he should avoid such company, such places, and such amusements, those that may make him forget his chosen ideal. We're proofing as we go. Proofing as we go, proofing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh. Play. Yeah. So the point is concentration. He should live a chaste and pure life, always discriminating right from wrong, and struggling to control his passions and desires by directing them Godward. You see, it's like we're coming into the neighborhood of a galaxy, of a spiral galaxy. Oh, they got more arms for you, Swami. I wanted to show you that the other day. Now they got 4 arms in the Milky Way Galaxy. Yep, the telescopy is getting better and figuring it out. And we're just a wandering little whatever we are, planet, even a star, and here we come, and we find this huge thing circling like a grand pinwheel in the sky with 200, 300 billion stars. And of course there's an attraction. And of course there's a yearning. Talk about we. You're in the company of God, company. And more it becomes a one-pointed thing. So yes, as Martin Buber, the great rabbi, mystic rabbi of our age, of our day, said in his book, I and Thou. But they tell some wonderful stories in India about the fellow who went to the door. And he knocked on the door of God and got an answer from inside. Who is it? It's I. Door to know. Who is it? It's I. Nothing. Who is it? And then in the swirl of these 200 million, billion, 300 billion stars that are you're one with and swirling around the center, which is God, the devotee said, Thou. And the door opened. I can't help it, Swami. It's so irrelevant. You hear about the woman that had a parrot. She had a trained parrot, and she wanted to go to the grocery store, which is difficult for us these days. We're not going to the grocery. But she figured it'd be okay, even though she had an appointment with the plumber coming over that day, you know what I mean? Because she trained the parrot to answer the door. So plumber comes, rings the doorbell, and from inside the house he hears, who is it? He says, the plumber. Who is it? The plumber. Who is it? The plumber. So, he just has almost apoplectic. He just faints dead away right in front of the door. He's just down there. And so the old lady comes back to the grocery store, finds this hubbub of people, in a crowd circling somebody or something. And she said, who is it? And from inside the door comes the plumber. So God's ready to answer the door. He said it over and over again, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And then Jesus said, knock, and it shall be opened unto you. So Jesus finally comes out and says, I am my Father. Or one. And the wonderful Mahavakya, one of the great phrases of Indian spirituality, from the knowers of God, the seers of God, the lovers of God, the workers for God, the philosophers, the lovers of wisdom for God, the meditators, yes, the meditator, even with your eyes open while you're doing your work. You know what they say? They say, Soham, Soham. I am He, I am He. Or thou art that, but I am He. That's the ultimate. So he said he should be angry with himself for not realizing his ideal. Everybody's angry with something else, everybody but me. He should hate his sinful nature because it keeps him away from the path of bhakti and prevents him from remembering his beloved. But remember, we were just told just a moment ago that, the Bhakti-Yoga attains easily by offering the fruits of all of his works to the almighty source of activity and ultimate end of all motives. And when these powers begin to work, the soul will be awakened from the deep sleep of ignorance and self-delusion. So our Swamis have been given the joy of coming to the West with its overemphasis on ethics, which is not the end of being. It's the means to the end. And they're not downplaying ethics, but they're seeing how much more can be accomplished in the West by saying you can do it. Your real nature is divine. Your real nature is infinity, perfection, already within. And having the drunkard forgetting his drink. And so forth and so on. We've had some people that have had lifetime addiction to alcohol. One was the father of one of our eventual nuns. And we've never worked on alcoholism, directly. We've never done it. Oh yeah, we have AA here and all, but and you know, Gerald Hurd Help Fund, AA, all that. But what the Swamis say is, love God. Turn all of your thoughts to God in rejoicing and joy. You can do it. It's who you really are. And yep, the alcoholism, which happened to destroy one of our devotees' fortune, because he spent it on whiskey and gambling, just dropped away. Just dropped away one day. So even Sri Ramakrishna said, you know, I'm hearing a little bit about the Christian Bible right now, and look who he is, superluminary. So it seems to me there's a little too much emphasis, you know, on the sin thing. So they've decided to have the emphasis on who you are and who you shall be. I love it. It turns out it was Oscar Wilde, and Swami used to quote this, said every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. So you ain't going to hear that word around here. You're going to hear the word love God. The words love God. Thus he will gradually succeed in correcting his faults. Are you hearing? This is a huge schoolhouse we're talking about, coming in to purview up. And in gaining control over his animal nature. These are flaming sentences. Swami, it's all yours. Why don't you take two for the price of one?
A traveler on the path of bhakti should observe cleanliness of body and mind, should be truthful, and lead a simple life.
Sorry, why don't you give us that again?
A traveler on the path, yeah, the mic had to travel over here first. The traveler on the path of bhakti should observe cleanliness of body and mind, should be truthful, and lead a simple life without injuring any living creature mentally or physically. He should not kill any animal for his food, neither should he covet that, you've got a better print than I do, covet that which does not belong to him. He should furthermore obey the laws of health, which tend to make him physically strong, as well as those moral laws, the violation of which weakens the mind. So long as the devotee thinks of God with a form and believes that he is outside of his soul and of the universe, he can make a mental picture of him and worship the divine ideal through that form. Or he may keep before him some symbolic figure, like the cross, which will remind him of his ideal at the time of devotion. But a bhakta should never mistake the imaginary form or the symbolic figure for the real ideal.
Capital I.
Wherever there is such a mistake, there is to be found spiritual degeneration and the expression of ignorance in the form of sectarianism, bigotry, and fanaticism.
Hey, you still with us? You staying with us? This is strong stuff, you know. You come into Vedanta, man, you come in strong. So each of these yogas, some other day we might have some fun evaluating that, has its strengths and its weaknesses. And for those of us who love the grand Swamis that we may have met, that you don't simply like, you should like all the Swamis. You like him, attracted to him, feel, but that you adore. These grand 4 yoga Swamis who are paragons among men. Even they will tell you that a one-pointed focus on love, it's all right to have a one-pointed focus on love, but if, you're in the extreme, which will go over into the apparent and not the real, an excess, extreme, the mistaking of the apparent for the real, that kind of Bhakti-Yoga can have consequences. And what are they? Fanaticism. And I kind of think, it's like fleas. Have you heard the oldest poem in the world? It's called Fleas. And the poem is Adam had 'em. And every major religion in the world, river of faith, has these fleas, fanatics. And what is it? My way is the right way. And it's either my way or the byway or the highway you're getting out.
Or no way.
No way, Jose. It's a terrible thing in the name of religion that something false that is a fake bill. I like to say $20 bill, They don't bother making many $1 bills anymore. It's got Andy Jackson's picture on it. There's something, even the artificial, even the fake, has got to have the reality as a substitute. That's why religion is so dangerous, don't you see? And the thing's worth nothing. Because it's forgery. It's actually worth less than nothing because you sure don't want to walk downtown and have one in your pocket. Somebody say, now how did you get that? And whatever. But the real bhakti doesn't result in that because all of this is just an expansion of one's own ego. And it's very serious. Let's face it. In this country, it's very serious.
There is a comment that I think might be relevant.
Of course.
So, someone says, sadly, fanatically pointed love forgets the divine and harm other children of the divine, who they have considered as others. They forget that we are all children of God.
Forget that we're all children of God. Probably was difficult to hear that. Why don't you try it one more time? Just a second.
Sure.
Because it's good. Can you...
Okay.
Is it close enough? I think it's one. There we go. Yeah, all right, here you go. All right.
So the comment is, sadly, fanatically pointed love forgets the divine and harm others, children of the divine, who they have considered as others. They forget that we are all children of God.
So I must say that this last line, I think we forget or neglected our peril whenever, wherever, there is such a mistake of having the imaginary form of the ideal, the capital I, God, the Absolute, the One, the Supreme. Whenever such a mistake, there is to be found spiritual degeneration and the expression of ignorance. That's the point. Hey, Vivekananda saying science and truth are all the religion there is. Science means knowledge. They're both searching for truth, the spiritual man and the science. As long as they go together, it's hand in hand. Expression of ignorance in the form of sectarianism, bigotry, and fanaticism.
All right. Gradually, as the bhakta approaches God, he will rise above such dualistic conceptions and realize that his beloved is not only transcendent, but also immanent in nature, that nature is his body and that he dwells everywhere. He is the soul of our souls and the life of our life, and also one stupendous whole, while we are but his parts. The bhakta then reaches that state, which is called qualified non-dualism. He sees that from the minutest insect up to man, all living creatures are related to Ishvara. Ishvara is the most appropriate Sanskrit word for God, who is the all-pervading and eternal ruler of the universe. He sees from the minutest insect up to man, all creatures are related to the Ishvara as a part is related to the whole. Therefore, he cannot kill or injure any living being. Understanding that everything pertaining to any part belongs to the reality, to the whole, he says, "Whatever is mine is thine," and it is from that moment that absolute self-resignation and self-surrender to the will of the Ishvara begin to reign supreme in the soul of the yogi. Then he is able to say from the bottom of his heart, "Let thy will be done," and never again can he forget that his soul is a part of Ishvara. His devotion henceforth consists in remembering this new relation, and his worship takes a new form. Whatever he does with mind or body becomes an act of worship of the Supreme Whole, for he realizes that he possesses no power that does not belong to God. Eating, drinking, walking, talking, and every other work of his daily life become acts of devotion, and the entire existence of such a bhakta is a continuous series of acts of worship. Then the heart is purified and selfishness is dead.
Why does it take us to the end?
The devotee thus rises to the second grade of Bhakti-Yoga and begins to taste that divine love, which is the fruit of the tree of bhakti. Here all distinction between the lover and the beloved disappear. The lover of the loved, the lover, the loved, and the love all merge into one ocean of divinity. The soul of the bhakta is transformed and manifesting omniscience, God consciousness, perfect freedom, and all other divine qualities, and it attains to the highest ideal of Bhakti Yoga.
I just need to read this for a second.
So we have time for a couple of questions. Make sure that we have more than just one awake person out there. After all, this is YouTube, not snooze tube. So we want to make sure everyone's awake out there. You ready?
Well, I'd love to know, are we able to take questions?
So far we don't have it, but they might start coming now that we offer space for it.
I'd like to think, because it is nighttime and we're able to see the stars probably better in LA today, around the world, because of the lowering of pollution that has happened since people aren't driving their cars as much and so on. And so I'm thinking around the campfire, as it were, of this blessed evening as the earth is spinning, the counterclockwise directions seen from the northern hemisphere, on its path around the sun, and then the sun is having its path around the galaxy. I understand that it takes about 50,000 years for the light from a star on the edge of our Milky Way Galaxy to reach us. We're fairly close to the edge. Not that close, but fairly close. And not only that, but it takes about 200 million years for one complete cycle of this galaxy, which is 100,000 miles, we'll say, in diameter. So with all the nights and evenings that people have looked at the stars, maybe around the fire, and thought of some kind of elevation of spirit, which they've come to call the divine, and that pull, that wonderful magnetism. There is something out there that they found a few years back, some years back, called the Great Attractor. I love it, capital G, capital A. And it's just some kind of a conglomeration of matter, collection of galaxies or something that, yeah, has a magnetic effect, gravity on us and other things. But I'm just thinking of the fact that so many people have sought for God, searched for God, yearned for God. Yearning is one of the first steps of searching, even out of pain and suffering. And so I do love that song, Maybe we can bring in some other verses again, but give me that old-time religion. Give me that, old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion, don't you see? Yeah. It was good for Paul and Silas. It was good for Paul and Silas. It was good for Paul and Silas, and it's good enough for me. Well, when they talk about the old-time religion, you can talk about all the peoples of the earth since way under BC, when they first started searching for the unknown, for the answer to the absence of pain and the fullness of eternal joy. So, Swami, what are some of your thoughts on this book that you found for us? This is great.
Well, I mean, yeah, I always think of, Bhakti Yoga can be kind of like the martial arts of yoga, where you take things that could be obstacles, and like being attracted to, and wanting to find love, a relationship. Everybody wants to find a relationship, and they're searching for somebody to love. You turn all that towards God. So is it just like in Tai Chi or some other martial art, you use the energy of your opponent to get your to get the upper hand. Same thing with Bhakti Yoga. You're using that natural yearning for some sort of loving relationship, and you're developing it into a relationship towards God, and that takes you towards your goal, not towards the goal that ordinary love takes you.
Oh, it's good stuff. You know about, I think I can use that little thing you got there.
That's fun.
What the Swami says about jujitsu or whatever
Your magnetic attraction.
Yeah, whatever. And it's really true. You know what the worst thing you can do to somebody that's got a hold of the front door handle, and he's whirling, he's shoving, he's hanging on, trying to push through that door and come in your home, your sacred space, your private. The biggest thing you can do in jiu-jitsu is to grab a hold of the handle, inside handle yourself, and pull it open. And here the guy comes flying in and sprangling all over the floor. Pull it open! So you just put your hand on the handle of God and say, God, open the door for me. Wow. Love you. I always have. I have to tell you about Yoga Prana, because Yoga Prana was a lot of fun, All of our friends have been fun here. And she went one time, I think she was there herself, to a healing service, a healing ceremony. And some lady comes running down the aisle, throws away her crutches or whatever it is. And anyway, she just falls on the floor, like a horse, all just right there on the floor. And the congregation all rushed over to try to help her up. And the preacher said, speaking of this wonderful experience we're talking about with God, said, leave her there, leave her lay where Jesus flang her.
All right. We'll close with a chant here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Peace, peace, peace.
Thank you, Maharaj's pranams to you.
Well, that'll teach them not to ask questions. They'll get a song if they don't.
Hey, you got to be sure we're cut off. Make sure.